Hey everyone, welcome to Locked On Lakers for Friday. The Lakers officially signed most of their free agents on Thursday, and now are they looking at a drama-free offseason? That's next.
You are Locked On Lakers, your daily Los Angeles Lakers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks to everybody for making Locked On Lakers first listen every day, Monday through Friday. No matter how or where you get your podcast, it's always going to be free. It's never going to be behind a paywall. And Locked On Lakers on YouTube is where you can go hang out with nearly 20,000 Lakers fans, all really excited about the work that the Lakers, most of them at least, are really excited about the work the Lakers have done in the offseason. Andy, and much of that work was made official on Thursday as the Lakers finally got around to actually signing all the people that we were talking about and been talking about over the course of the week, and everybody except D'Angelo Russell, who is on vacation. Not some sort of weird conspiracy where he's like been left out and he's going to be part of a shocking trade somewhere else or whatever. Nope, he's just on vacation. But everybody else, Andy, they're all signed and ready to go and are officially members of the Lakers. So it feels like the start of something. It feels like, the official beginning of this thing. And, it's interesting. I did, you and I both do work with Spectrum Sportsnet in LA, the TV station that carries Lakers games. And does their pre and post games and their studio shows and stuff like that. And we are frequent guests on the network. They asked a question that I guess could be looked at in a couple different ways. So I'll just ask it in both. They asked me, who of these free agents that they signed on Thursday, and you can include Russell in there if you want, because eventually he is going to sign the deal, is the most important and the best one that they signed. And you could look at it, I guess, they brought back. You could also look at it in terms of the dudes that are new. When you look at the new guys, Andy, who do you see as like the best move that they made, the most important, like your kind of your favorite now that things have settled?
I mean, the obvious answer, I think, to a lot of people would be on the surface, Gabe Vincent, just because he's the guy that got the most money. He has the longest commitment with the, if not expectations, certainly the possibility in a lot of people's minds that D'Angelo Russell was brought in to eventually get traded. I think a lot of people already have Gabe Vincent earmarked as the eventual starting point guard of this team. And I get it. And I do think he's an important part of the new additions. But I would actually say Taurean Prince in his own right, because in terms of his actual skill set at the forward position, whether the 3 or 4, maybe even a little bit of spot 2 minutes, that shooting and what I hope will be some good defensive versatility, I think Taurean Prince actually provides more of what the Lakers are missing than Gabe Vincent, even if you think Gabe Vincent is a more accomplished player or a better player, if that's your opinion, than Prince. I think Prince actually may fill more immediate, less fillable needs than Vincent does.
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, that was my answer right away was Prince. And it's for what you're talking about. Like Vincent is a good sign. No problem with it. I like him. He's a good player, but he is essentially Dennis Schroeder. And, so you don't get better necessarily. You don't change the dynamic of your team significantly by, kind of replicating the player who was there last year. Some people think Vincent's a little better. Some people don't. I think they are pretty comparable. I mean, night to night, they're going to be pretty comparable. But what Prince does is different, fundamentally different than what they had last year, because he brings the sort of Beasley Walker skill set of, like, theoretically you've got some shooting on the outside and you've got the a little bit of a perimeter game and some of those things, and he shifts it from the backcourt where you remember last year they go into training camp with like 17 guys who basically play the 1, 2, or 3. And most of their threes were basically, tall twos. So, Patrick
Occasionally even
Beverley,
short ones.
right? In the case of Patrick Beverley. And so, by shifting that 3-point shooting floor spacing position to the front court, like a legitimate 3-4, now, you get so much more positional versatility. That's something that's different than what they had last year versus, different. It's just different than what they had last year. It was funny. Like they listed, the guys when they were kind of putting out the depth chart, they had Reddish behind LeBron as the backup small forward, and both Prince and Hachimura as backup power forwards, which I get. Like, I understand the grouping of it, and both of those guys.
Hachimura and Prince were both backup forward?
They had them both, because both of them can play the four. But I think what's really significant is that, you have a guy in Prince who can play back, both of those forward positions. And whereas last year, really, when they didn't have, other than like LeBron, I'm trying to think, like, who did they open the season with last year who was like a legit 3-4 as opposed to a 2-3? Like, when you look at guys on the wing,
Juan Toscano Anderson, I think would be the answer.
He'd be the only one. Like, I had forgot about JTA, but like that's kind of crazy that they didn't have that last year. And so Prince, I love how hard JTA works, and so Prince is a major upgrade over Juan Toscano Anderson.
They were an extremely small team last year. I mean, for all the crap that Darvin Ham took, and often justifiably, for going to 3-guard lineups and this tendency to always err on the side of small, there were times where he legitimately did not have a whole lot of optionality along those lines. Now, going into next year, you've got Taurean Prince, you've got Rui, you've got Jared Vanderbilt, you obviously have LeBron. Depending on if you ever wanted to play someone alongside AD, you would have AD at the 4. They just have a lot more balance size-wise to this roster. I think they have more
large, and then you start to talk about large guards in certainly D'Lo, and then if he is able to play, Hood Schifino brings a lot of size to that position,
as does Christie.
Max, I was about to say, and then there's Max Christie. So it's like you have, at 6'5", 6'6". So you're starting to add, if not bulk, like they are not a bulky team in terms of like big centers and stuff like that, but they're a pretty long team now. And if you go back to that 2020 formula, length was a major part of that team's success.
Yeah, they're still missing some size, and we've talked a lot about it, and we'll continue to talk about it. They need to sign another playable 5, but they are a much bigger team to open this season than they were opening last season, and I think that's going to be very good for them moving forward.
Arguably, the best signing for the Lakers was Austin Reeves. When you balance the player to the sort of the talent to the dollar figure, the Lakers came out way ahead on that one. Why didn't anybody make Austin Reeves an offer that he could sign? We'll talk about that next.
Locked on Lakers is brought to you by BetterHelp, and it's easy to get caught up in what everyone needs from you and not to take that moment to think about what you need for yourself. And it's hard to balance being there for your significant other, for your children, your extended family, your job. But again, remember, you take that moment for yourself. And we all can end up feeling stretched thin and burned out when you spend that much time just giving for others. And life doesn't come with a user manual. It's hard to know exactly the moves that you're supposed to be making. And it's easy to feel stuck when life doesn't feel like it's working for you. And I can personally speak to how much therapy has helped me during a really difficult period in my life, for me and my family. And sitting down, talking with someone was huge. BetterHelp has connected over 3 million people with licensed therapists. It's convenient, accessible anywhere, 100% online. There's no waiting rooms, there's no traffic. Plus, it's affordable. So just fill out a quick questionnaire to match with a therapist. And if things aren't clicking, you can easily switch to a new therapist anytime. So if you want to live a more empowered life, therapy can get you there. Visit betterhelp.com/lockedon today for a 10% discount off the first month. Again, that's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon.
So in nature, Andy, there's this thing, like where animals develop, like insects, or develop that, like the brightly colored, the skeletons and stuff. So like to tell other predators, like, don't eat me, I'm poisonous. I feel like that's kind of what the Lakers did with Austin Reeves this offseason. Like they just flashed and made it so obvious to the rest of the league, like, don't bother sending him a contract because we're going to match it. And the contract never came. Like, the Lakers could offer 56 million or whatever it turns out that number is going to be. I'm sure wouldn't have batted an eye, if that number had gotten up to like 70 or 80 million, an average of 20 million a year once it's all said and done. Maybe might have batted an eye if it got up to 100 million, that total max that he could have gotten, which would have made this third and fourth years of his contracts well over $30 million a season. But those offers never really came. Why do you think ultimately he didn't get an offer? Is it just because the Lakers scared everyone away? Is relative value? What do you think?
Well, I mean, I think there is something to that, the idea of futility, and you would be essentially wasting your own time. Like, I will admit, I am not shocked, but I am a bit surprised that nobody put the Lakers to the test. If maybe for a 10% chance that they actually blink and you get the player you want, but the 100% probability that if the Lakers call your bluff, you're actually messing with their books down the road and giving them much larger numbers for Austin Reeves' third and fourth season under that contract. It was interesting. I heard Zach Lowe say today on the Low Post podcast that the Spurs had actually been debating an offer sheet for Reeves, but they never pulled the trigger. He said, quote, "I think the Reeves deal has a chance to be one of the best contracts in the league from a team perspective, and the Lakers got very, very lucky that nobody paid them through the nose. I know San Antonio was going back and forth on it, and for whatever reason, they didn't do it." Obviously, Zach didn't know the reason. I don't know the reason, but it did get me thinking about San Antonio had been talked about as one of the teams that maybe would look to put the screws to the Lakers. But then I started thinking about, if it's not San Antonio, how many teams were actually equipped to do it in the first place? Especially once Houston went quickly after Fred VanVleet and then Dylan Brooks pretty soon after. The part maybe where I was surprised that I think I overestimated was how many teams would have actually been in a position to do this in the first place. I think that's maybe where I mostly read this wrong. Not even so much the idea that teams wouldn't want to try to test the Lakers, again, if for no other reason than just mess with their future books, but just how many teams actually could have done it if they wanted to.
Yeah, I think I think ultimately, I wonder if this is a place where, like San Antonio, for example, if you give the first 2 years of Austin Reeves' deal, are locked in. It's like 25 million, 26 million, whatever it is, which means the last 75 million of his contract, whatever that, give or take a couple million either way, come in the last 2 years.
Yeah.
And even if you're a team that doesn't have a lot, that isn't a huge free agent destination, or doesn't have a lot of future cap, whatever expenditures, whatever, like that's a lot of money for us, potentially for Austin Reeves, where you're talking, 70, what is that? 36 million, an average of 36, $37 million a year. I don't think there's a team in the NBA who doesn't have to think about that. You look at the economics now of the CBA, and a team like San Antonio, now you have Victor Wembanyama, and you have a couple other young players who you're probably going to need to be signing going forward over there. They have some good young talent there. Not going to keep them all, but also now you're in a position where you probably are going to be looking at trading for potentially a frontline superstar or something like that to pair with Wemby and all this. It's just, I think the Lakers caught a real break. I agree with Zach that they caught a break that any kind of number that was tolerable for another team that doesn't mess with their own stuff too much was just too easy for the Lakers to match. There was no kind of middle. And we talked about this scenario going into the offseason, that Reeves was playing too well to get the contract that he deserved. And that's essentially what happened. Like it's the third year of that deal, because the fourth year, if he continues on this trajectory, Reeves will almost certainly opt out. He'll get a new deal and get paid a lot more. But the Lakers are going to have a huge advantage in that third year, regardless of whether that's an Anthony Davis team, they've turned it over to something else or whatever, to only be paying Austin Reeves, whatever it is, $14 or $15 million a year. That could be the best bargain in the NBA if he develops into that sort of all-star adjacent type player, sort of the Andre Iguodala, not exactly a superstar, but so good at everything, he makes your team better. Like, that is just an amazing bit of fortune for the Lakers that will pay dividends a couple years down the road.
And that's also why players hate restricted free agency. And why.
But it's not just restricted. It's restricted free agency combined with the weird arenas rules
sure,
that really
but
hurt you.
You will not find a player that is a fan of restricted free agency at all. I mean, and this is a big reason why, more often than not, I think in the aggregate, it works against the player than helps him out.
Yeah, I think that's true. But yeah, I think the part that really came out well for the Lakers this year overall was that all of their deals work financially. Whether you are a person who thinks they should be spending more aggressively and maybe they made a mistake by staying under that apron and hard capping themselves, which does save them money and all that other kind of stuff. They were able to do these things with contracts that feel reasonable. I am not convinced Gabe Vincent is going to be a 6 man of the year candidate like I think some people are pretty excited about. But I don't think there's a high chance that you're going to look over the course of the next 3 years and think you're just getting completely rooked by paying Gabe Vincent $11 million a year.
No, I think he's too good a player for that, and by NBA standards, it's too low of a contract.
Yeah, when you start to list out, the other thing they did was they listed out all the players that they signed and the value of their contracts. It really just if you have a chance to be an NBA player, you should. It's really nice work if you can figure out how to get it. Lakers, Andy, are not even kind of involved in all of the big drama around superstars that is swirling, whether that's James Harden, whether that is Damian Lillard. It is a strange place for the Lakers to be. It is a wonderful place for the Lakers to be. We'll discuss it next. So once the Lakers kind of closed the door on the whole Kyrie thing, Andy, there was no avenue, no nothing. Like it's the first time I can remember that any superstar has ever been on the block where nobody even bothers trying to formulate a way to get that player to the Lakers. And that's what's happened with Damian Lillard and James Harden. It is a wonderful change, I think, from my perspective.
Yeah, there aren't a lot of, I guess, upsides to having a player even of LeBron's stature and still the level that he's playing at in his 21st season. Like the idea of having a guy pushing 40 at, making $40-ish million a year, like that is never going to be ideal just because in a salary cap league, it isn't. But the upside to where LeBron is in his career right now is that there's only so much pressure he can put on the team to get what he wants or he's going to bolt, because how much longer are you planning to do this with LeBron anyway? Like, I'll be honest, LeBron's got this season coming up and then he's got a player option for 2024, 2025 if he chooses to exercise it. Unless it's at a super, super deep discount, I honestly don't want LeBron past that. Because it's just not practical to have LeBron at the salary that he could still command, even acknowledging what he can still do. Planning around that is not practical for a team. And I'm sure the Lakers have to be, with all respect towards LeBron and all acknowledgement of box office and the economics and putting asses in seats and all that stuff, there's only so much fear about him leaving. And like, as much as you want to keep LeBron happy, because there's no upside to having a guy of his stature miserable, there's a difference between needing him happy and needing him doing backflips. And, it's not the same pressure as when LeBron was 32. And the reason I go into all this is that's where a lot of the drama comes from with superstars. It's the fear of exit.
I would say beyond next year, I wouldn't enter into a 5-year deal or 4, but you want to go year to year with LeBron. I'm as long as he's playing well, I'm fine with it. But
at what price though?
Depends.
You're going to keep going $40 million a year? No, I wouldn't.
$40 million worth of basketball, sure. I
don't think he is.
That's a separate question, but if he's still really good, and he can help your team win a title, and sure, I don't have a problem with it, but I wouldn't go long term. To me, it's just like, they put themselves in a position and, where they just like the physics of trying to add another superstar, play the superstar game, or do it like it would have been so hard, but it's funny. Like, that's, I think, part of the reason I think their offseason is getting such good reviews is in part because they've just done normal, responsible things that people don't expect the Lakers to do. They always expect the Lakers to go after the superstar and, throw every caution to the wind and go get Russell Westbrook and do all these things. And they haven't. I mean, to your point about LeBron, like, I guess if there was a fear that, add Damian Lillard or I'm going to leave, like, maybe there is, but, the other advantage, I guess, is there's less fear in losing LeBron, but also you have a superstar in LeBron who is less, maybe for those reasons, less prone to really be exerting that kind of leverage. I mean, I realized, people looked at the retirement thing as a potential leverage thing, and they look at everything he does as a leverage thing. But compared to what he used to do,
but you know what,
though, Cleveland, what he did in Miami, and all these things, so like that level of laying pressure on a franchise, he's not doing that stuff anymore because it's just not nearly as credible. Because not only does he not want to go anywhere, his family doesn't want to go anywhere. Other teams aren't willing to move every mountain to acquire him. You're not going to empty your war chest of everything, of every young player and every draftee to go get LeBron at this point, like, for 1 year, 2 years, I don't know. So it's just like the context is favoring the Lakers to not have any of this. And I think, the reality of LeBron and all that. And then it's just, finally, it just seems like they've got two superstars and they've got other young players and they're still spending a decent amount of money, but it just seems like they've finally turned a corner on that a little bit.
We will never know just how restrained the Lakers would have been if, say, they actually had the assets and or the space to bring in Damian Lillard, to bring in Kyrie Irving, to bring in James Harden. If there were actual avenues for making that happen, would the organization have remained restrained? I don't know. I need a larger sample size.
I'll be honest with you. Look, I'll say this. If you have the material to at least consider a Damian Lillard trade, you should consider
right. Sure. All I'm saying,
I understand what you're getting. It would have been interesting to see what they do.
Yeah, that's part of the reason why. It's a big part of the reason why I think the Lakers have not been, certainly by Laker standards, linked to a lot of this. Is I think even the loosest of people, when it comes to ginning this stuff up, recognize there's simply no avenue for making it happen.
Right. And to try, for the Lakers to have tried, to have cleared the decks to open $30-something million in cap space or whatever it might have been.
Sure, but for some of these guys, that's not enough.
I'm sure, but I'm saying, but even if somebody said, you know what, guys, if you get to $35 million with Kyrie, that's good enough for him. He'll do a 2-and-1 for you. that third year, whatever, like that'll be enough. Like we'll get you Kyrie for 35 plus a player option, whatever. The consequences to that for roster building were so extreme. But it just, nobody, until they didn't do it, I don't think most people, myself included, were like 100% ironclad sure that they weren't. I was pretty sure. I was, I would have been pretty shocked if they had cleared the decks and all that stuff. But there was, just that little piece of saying, well, until they don't do it, they could. Real quick before we go, like the Lillard thing particularly, I mean, James Harden trading him it's a whole other, but the Lillard thing though, talking about a guy who's still very well regarded, very well respected, and is now he's trying to force his way just to Miami and is, kind of conjuring up a lot of these discussions about like what players owe their stars. These are things that are certainly relevant to the Lakers.
What teams owe the stars?
Yeah, I'm sorry. What teams owe their stars, and should the Portland kind of acquiesce here and just send him to Miami for all of the work that he's done for Portland? It's an interesting dilemma where Lillard risks, at least in the short term, torching a lot of the goodwill that he's spent, more than a decade building in Portland.
Yeah, I mean, it's a bad look if Portland traded Dame somewhere like, very broadly speaking, the Hornets. Like they legitimately
are forever the example of the place that like the basketball hinterlands.
Right. They legitimately owe Damian Lillard more than that. But at the same time, Dame messaging a bleep fit, unless he's only traded to Miami, who, if nothing else, it is complicated for them to come up with a deal that Portland, I think, would legitimately consider good enough. That's a bad look for Dame. And I think Portland should try to find a way to get him to Miami, if for no other reason than their own optics in this. But if they're having legitimate difficulty finding a deal that they think makes sense, and eventually Dame refuses to expand like a wish list to, 2 teams, like Portland has a right to prioritize themselves first. I think if they ultimately decide, say the best deal they get, I'm just throwing this out there, Philadelphia, and they can get Dame to a place where it is legitimately competitive, but it's not his first choice, I don't have a problem with him doing that. Mm-hmm. Especially if he's not willing to open up his own wish list wider. And I don't believe for a second that Dame will not show up to camp, whether it's in Portland or whether it's to some other team. Because I think Dame is just one of those guys who's wired to play. I think he is, and I mean this is a compliment, he's too responsible. I think he's too professional not to do that. And I also think too, he recognizes he's starting to enter his mid-30s. Is he really going to crap away one of his prime years and just sit it out? Like, I don't believe for a second that he would do that. And if he did that in Portland, to be perfectly honest, what difference does it make? Like, they're already starting a rebuild anyway. They got the players to do it. It doesn't matter if he sits.
It's just an interesting dilemma where everybody kind of did the thing that makes sense. It was smart for Portland to sign him to the long-term deal and try to, because you don't until Damian Lillard says he wants to leave, you do not do anything to push him out the door. Nope. I don't think. Nope. Some people view this stuff differently. You blow it up, start the rebuild. Rebuilding is awful and can take decades. You may never get back to where you were.
And all things being equal, he wanted to stay.
He wanted to stay. I don't mind. I understand, Lillard, being on the fence, and, he takes the money and it's a year later and now he wants out. You know what? Damian Lillard, he has earned the money. It's fine. This is one of those situations where when things go south, it is impossible for everyone. The closest thing was when, I guess, was it Chris Paul getting out of Oklahoma City? Wherever he just kind of stayed quiet. Was it Oakland when he got traded out of
New Orleans?
I'm sorry,
New Orleans.
Yeah, where he wanted out, but didn't really talk about it much.
New
And
Orleans.
they found it right, and they found him a home that made sense. But I don't know if he only had one team on his list. So curious to see how this turns out. I think it's going to take a while. I don't think Harden and Lillard are going to be moving anytime soon. I think this is going to go much closer to the front.
In part because their moves might be connected. So
yeah, that's true. So we'll see. Locked On Lakers on YouTube is where you can go to hang out and talk about the show and ask us questions. We are moving into Summer League. We'll get some more of that stuff for next week, but really want to answer and take a lot of your questions now that free agency really has calmed down. Lakers short of that 14 spot are pretty well set in terms of their roster. So we'll get into all that stuff next week. Everybody have a great weekend.